So this is an overview of the new project. So you do have a student workbook that's quite useful. So this is a new unit, explore and apply the creative design process to 2D forms. So I am going to adjust the current assignment that's there to make it more fashion relevant. So I'll show you last semester's brief, because the brief is going to be very similar. So you'll be able to get started. So this, just to tell you what the unit's about, it's all about the process of how you get into coming up with new ideas. So it's the design process we're looking at. What's the creative process? This workbook's quite useful. It goes through all the phases of design. So the initial thing is when you source materials, and that's what we'll do first using Pinterest. And it's got some practice activities which I won't make you do because we're just going to jump into the project. But one of the first ways to start a project, as you've already been doing, is to research it. So I'll show you, so just remember you've got this workbook and it is a useful resource in terms of what the unit is covering, and sometimes it's got really good definitions and examples. So this resources is in your resources folder on the Moodle. So that's your student workbook. I don't expect you to do all the exercises in it, but sometimes it's really great when you're trying to understand something you're not sure about. It does have examples, and sometimes it's got really good references and other movies you can watch. So just letting you know that's there. So now I'll just show you a previous version of this brief. Get it up on screen. Okay, that's the workbook. Updated. Oh, sorry, that's not the one I'm looking for. I'll just check I've got the right one. Sorry about this. Maybe what I'll do is show you a finished one from last term. Let's see. Mirabel, I think, finished. Did a good job of finishing hers. Yes. So what we're aiming for. So I'll show you the brief. Our brief is going to look similar to this, and it starts off showing you what is essentially the finished product. So the idea is to use to develop your creative process so that you know the best way for you to approach a project. So we're going to start off with a concept, just some words to give you some ideas, a direction to go into a concept. The challenge is to come up with a completely new garment that doesn't exist. So in terms of what you've done before, you were looking at ideas that other people have come up with. You were, in fact, for a magazine cover, you were actually copying illustrations, and that was a great way. Sorry, you were copying existing photos of existing fashion, and that was a great way to develop your illustration skills. So that's what we've been doing. We've been trying to develop your understanding of ways to produce convincing illustrations of fashion. So we've got a few techniques up our sleeve for that, but this is all about how do I come up with something that's never existed before? How do I come up with a garment that is completely original, doesn't look like anything else that's already out there, or is a completely fresh new invention of something that is already out there? So the garment could be anything. It doesn't have to be male or female. It could be evening wear, it could be day wear. That's kind of up to you. However, it's how to approach when you don't have any ideas, when you run out of ideas, how do you get new ideas? That's really what the focus is of the first part of this. The final product will be a presentation board. And so the idea of a presentation board is it's something you would show, and you'd have more than one of these, because usually a fashion show, for example, has a range of garments for one particular concept. There'd be a whole range, so variations of it. And that's also what we're going to look at, is how do you get variations from one idea? You need lots of variations. So we'll look at a couple of videos on fashion designers talking about their process for a whole new concept for a show. We don't want to do anything quite as big as that, so we're just going to come up with a new concept for a completely new garment based on something. So I'm going to give you a range of words. This is an example of a student who used the word decay to come up with some interesting ideas. So this is sort of her final presentation board, and you see there's colours on there. You can also put examples of materials you might use, but she had a lot of different ideas she explored earlier on, and then through the process of drawing them up, first starting off with what's called brainstorming, which you might have done before. So we'll be doing brainstorming as our first step. So this is what we'll actually do today, is we'll get you to choose, I've got a few different words, concept words to start with. We'll get you to choose one of them and do some initial brainstorming. And then once you've done that on paper, we'll get you to actually go and get visual references to put around it like this. And so this is not a mood board yet. This is really initial exploration. So you can collect a lot of initial ideas on Pinterest, and then there might be one or two or more that give you, more solid directions to go in. So this was exploring circus and looking for ideas there, and this was exploring decay. So you can see there's two completely different concepts that have been explored to begin with to try and come up with a completely new original idea. So you can see there's quite a few different reference ideas she's come up with. Not all of them have led somewhere. But then the next step after coming up with what essentially is like brainstorming, that's a technique to get you going, to get you started. So working with create some words that are evocative to give you a direction, and then using a variety of ways of getting imagery. So Pinterest is one way of collecting things, but collecting them and putting them into Photoshop like this. And then after she got to this point, she's like, well, okay, there's one or two on there that I really think will give me some solid ideas to start drawing with. So it's kind of down here, we've got much more of a stronger mood board. That one's for circus. So really getting some really good reference ideas now for circus. Then there's another one here for decay. And at this point, there's a decision made about which one sort of has the stronger ideas. Which one is this student more interested in? So she's gone with decay. She's really liked this layering idea. So you can see this exploration at this point. The student is not going, oh, I'm designing a dress. I haven't even thought about whether it's a dress or what it is yet. It's just like, well, what's a good concept to come up with that might give me some interesting ideas I can push into a garment? So sometimes things, quite architectural can give really good structures. And we've actually got architecture as one of the themes, and I'll show you a Pinterest board just based on architecture that's really interesting. And so the next step after that is to then go, okay, for the circus theme, we're going to explore and find some very different ideas for garments based on circus. So still exploring. And then here's some for decay. And the student's gone ahead with the decay idea. And we've used the elements and principles of design. So, I was mentioning, a fashion designer needs to come up with once you've even got one concept, it's then, well, what do I do with that? What's the strongest idea? Choosing the strongest idea, but then using shape and form and texture and all the elements to kind of change up the one idea. So elements and principles can be a way to get multiple variations. So balance, for example, can be used shape can be used, but even just with one idea. So then she's explored that, and then she's come up with some different ideas. She's used collage, explored that as a way, and then here's the kind of final version of her board. You can see that the first board has used a different, the example that I was showing you there at the beginning, you can see that this student has used different drawing techniques to come up with the ideas and use the elements and principles. So, you know, different variations, length and height, etc., can give you different ideas, even with the one concept. So that's where we're heading with it. So I'll show you another couple of students' works, again, just to give you a bit more of an idea where people went with it. Abby did hers and finished it. So this one's good. This is architecture. So this is the initial mind map, and you can see it's based on architectural forms. But at this point, not trying to draw an actual garment yet, just exploring. That's what we want to do to begin with. So exploring. That's the mind map. And there's a decay one for this one as well. She's explored decay. Not sure which one she went with. She's gone, oh yeah, there's the mood board. So you can see the mood board is really, you know, getting a much more sort of definite direction. So from lots of different ways and lots of different kinds of architecture, this student's then gone, no, I really want this organic kind of architecture to be my inspiration. So you can see the difference. The initial exploration's got a lot of stuff on it. So in the case of architecture, there's like brainstorming different kinds of architecture, getting lots of initial imagery, but then deciding, okay, I like the organic stuff rather than the geometric things here. So then the mood board becomes something that's much more specific, and then let's have a look at how it translated to the final design. So she's gone through and used the shapes found in this inspiration with the architecture to produce this really organic garment, and produced a front, side and back view, and you can see also used a range of drawing techniques to do that. So that's where we're heading. This is really the final result. You have a new garment that didn't exist anywhere else. Now often we use this one and actually produce it in 3D with those paper dresses. So in your 3D subject with Joe, you may actually end up producing this or another one. You might do a different one, but because in this project you've learnt some techniques, some ways to get a completely original design out of nowhere. Yeah, so how do designers come up with new ideas? So brainstorming and collecting things on Pinterest can be a great starting point, but then assembling and getting a much more specific direction to make a mood board with, and then doing lots of drawing, lots of exploration in different ways, then using, once you get one idea, using the elements and principles of design also to try different sizes, different shapes, even based on the one concept. So I'll see if there's another one I can show you as another example. Who else finished theirs? And I might be able to show you some where they've done the final. So there's mind maps, and then the mood boards. See how the mood boards are much more specific. And I think they went through, I think this is Reese's, I think he did initial sketches. So trying out lots of different ideas based on one theme, and then lots of different ideas based on the second theme. And then I think this was the one that Reese actually built, and you can still see it out there in the corridor. There's the illustration. So you have a look at this technique. This is using white pencil on a black background, and that can be really effective in showing that three-dimensional form. And so the final presentation board, you put some of your inspiration on there, that then you explain your idea a little bit, and then you show the front, side and back views of it. And the idea is that there's enough on this, and you've thought about it with the front and the side and the back, so that you could actually make it out of paper. Now, I'm not sure if I can find the photos of the final one in here. Oh yes, here we go. So this is the final one. Didn't get the entire length of it done, but you can see the idea. You can see, trying to actually make it in 3D, but didn't do the whole thing. Did the top part. Okay, but the idea is that your drawing is good enough that you could produce the whole thing. So that's what you're seeing out there when you see the 3D versions. Like I say, you might not do this exact one. Let's see if we've got this one, the 3D model. Maybe it's sitting down here, the photo. Yes, here we go. That's examples. Let's see if we've got her one. There's her final one, based on the mood boards and the drawings. So that's a different unit. So you won't do that with me. You'll do the building of something in 3D. You'll do that with Jo. But you can talk to her about whether you use this one or a different one. But you certainly you should have a good enough drawing to work with to actually produce a 3D one. So this is another one. Yes, so Jordan did this one, produced it, and I'll show you if I can find her drawings were quite detailed, and she really did do a very close job of producing her 2D version. I think I have got them somewhere, because she did the 2D one the semester before. So I'll see if I can, I'll look that up, but yeah, so I think hers was already there. But let's see who else. Sam, I'll show Sam's. I think we've got a mood board there. Yeah, and again, yeah, sort of took flowers, but really took it all the way. And then I don't know if I've got the 3D design finally. That's the mood board showing, so you can see the final 3D. So actually built it. But the idea is that we produce, and this is a presentation board showing the 3D idea, and so you can see that producing it in paper is a nice way to really show off that concept. Before you've started a whole collection, before you've started sewing and making garments, you can use a paper version as a cheap way to really show the concept well. But the first step to get there is to really, use a lot of exploration of ideas and drawings. So I'll show you the assessment document for Sam, and you'll see the number of drawings in there that they did. So that's just the examples. That's okay. So that's Sam's brainstorming. Yep. So I'll be getting you to do this in a bit, and then producing the mind map. Again, there's a mind map in the middle, but then adding some imagery. So you might find that imagery using Pinterest or just straightforward looking on the internet. You can see a fabulous mood board here based around architecture. It's another example. And there's the one that Sam did. So that's another example of architecture. But then this is the one that Sam did for forest folklore. So that's where they went with it. And then they did using the elements and principles to try out different ideas. Some initial research, looking at examples, so you're going to be doing that, and you can use Pinterest. So, sorry if I'm flipping backwards and forwards here. I was just trying to see if his actual, or they've put their actual drawings in. Maybe not. They might have handed them in separately. Just looking for, no, I don't know where the drawings are for that one. Okay, but I think I showed you Reese's, didn't I? Mirabelle's. Don't think they said about Abby's. So Abby's was pretty good. So that's the finished product, and rather than paper, I think Abby used actual very cheap material. You can use. That's another way of approaching it. But the original 2D drawings, let's have a look at them. So that's the assessment document. So again, initial exploration. See the range of ideas that are being explored to begin with. So not going straight from one idea to begin with. Really exploring a whole lot of drawings. And you can see that's the drawing that eventually Abby went with. But that's what I wanted to see. I wanted you to see how many different ideas have been explored. And that's where actually thinking about the elements and principles, you can go, okay, let me try a different shape. What about a rounder version? It's the one concept based on that organic architecture, but here are a whole bunch of similar sort of shapes, but there's such a variation in the way they're explored. And that's what we're after. So that's why you'll see elements of and principles of design used and deliberately going, okay, let me try that idea out with a whole bunch of different shapes. Here's fatter shapes, wider shapes, and here's skinny, longer shapes, but they're all based around, they're coming off that mood board here. Yeah? So that's what we're going to step through. We're going to step through, first of all, we're really open. What will we explore? What will be the words we use? Architecture is a good place to start. So I'm going to show you, this is my Pinterest board, and these are examples of fashion inspired by architecture. So architecture, you can pick a particular style of architecture and base a whole, so this one, for example, is very much Baroque inspired, Baroque architecture. Origami is another word we've used to get ideas, but you can see how, going to a particular architecture, here's some examples, looking at the stained glass windows of Notre Dame, and then it's being directly inspired by that to create, a new garment. So it might seem unlikely to start with architecture, but it's actually a really fruitful direction to go in because there's so many different styles of architecture. So you can see that's a dress based, again, on quite Baroque architecture. I think this one's based on a tower. I'm not quite sure where that tower is. I'd have to look that up. I think it might be Myanmar, actually, like a Burmese temple. But you can see how inspiring that can be. It might seem unlikely to begin with, but what a great source of inspiration. Here's another one. So looking at a piece of architecture and then translating that into a design that's completely original. So even though, designers have explored these kind of themes before, that doesn't mean you won't get to a really original place. And origami is another one. So origami shapes. I think I've got a mood board just based on origami-inspired fashion. But architecture is great because there's so many different styles of architecture. in the world, and any of those styles could be inspiration for you. And you saw that other example where somebody looked at really kind of organic 60s stuff, and look at this one inspired by a staircase. It's incredible. Really interesting design work. So architecture is one of the words you could start exploring with, but obviously, on your first brainstorming session, you can start thinking about, oh, well, there's Baroque architecture, there's, ancient Egyptian architecture, there's, what interests me, and then start getting pictures. And there's nothing wrong with collecting initial ideas on Pinterest, because it will feed you more of the same of, whatever you're looking for. So that's architecture. I've got some other ones to show you as well. Let's just go back here to the beginning.
Jenny?
Yeah.
Could you show me design steps? Maybe first one, maybe drawing? Maybe.
The first step will be picking some words.
Yeah.
2 different words,
yeah,
and doing the mind maps, and that's what we'll do in a minute. But I just want to show you a few more examples. So fashion based around origami, for example, is another. I've got paper fashion now. I thought I had actual origami as one. Well, these are just, this is a whole board on construction methods. So that's probably jumping ahead a bit. I think I've got one on origami. Just to show you the range of different things you could explore. That was the one, fashion inspired by landscape. Okay, here's one inspired by different landscapes. So you could put the word landscape in the middle of your brainstorming, and look at a landscape that inspires you. So this one I think was inspired by desert dunes, the way dunes fold. This one's inspired by rocks and cracking. So you can see, this one's even inspired by the moon, a moon landscape.
Wow.
So you can see how far you can go, to find an original idea. You can take something that really doesn't seem related at all, that you just wouldn't, if you sit there and just think, oh gosh, I've kind of come up with a new idea, you can get very stuck. So these are ways of, it's like, for example, you could start with something like a sand dune and go, okay, look at that for an amazing structure and pattern. What could I do with that in terms of turning it into a garment? And we're very open about what the garment is. It doesn't have to be a dress. It can be any kind of garment. But when we talk about garment, it's the whole outfit. So you can think about hats being part of it, coats. Think about a whole outfit, shoes. All of that can go into the concept. I think this might be the origami one. No, this is the circus one. So this is fashion inspired. You can see the mood board's a great way to collect stuff immediately. You can see this is all coming out of circus. So there's this quite very, interesting explorations. The Harlequin, there are characters, circus characters. In fact, if you get right into looking at circus, it's very related to burlesque fashion, which was really in vogue for quite a while. And you can see some really interesting things inspired by circus, by the history of burlesque, and kind of even some of the circus stuff itself was inspired by early military jackets. So there's a lot of, like, the ringmaster outfits are very inspired by military, and they've got sort of epaulettes and everything. You could say military and go explore fashion based on military, like so many different ways you could take this. So it really is very open. However, we'll be pinning you down, you know, and that's why we're going to say explore 1 or 2 words to begin with. I don't know what this one is, inspired by nature, or just inspired by nature. Okay, so that's a little bit too broad. So if you go, I want to do fashion inspired by nature, then go more specific and go, okay, I want to look at feathers. I want to look at fashion inspired by birds. But don't look at what people have already done. Just start with pictures of birds or feathers. So you're making your own. So don't collect what I've done. I don't want you to go and find fashion already inspired by those things. That's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking, these are just examples of what you could achieve. But initially, you know, how did these designers get there? Well, maybe they wrote the word feather on a piece of paper and started exploring everything to do with that. And look at this amazing hat. You know, like it's extraordinary. You know, so this is the whole aim of this unit is to try to help you develop your own unique way of getting into, you know, getting past a block, for example, when you can't think of any ideas, having some different ways to get started. Line inspired, okay, so this one's just literally, you know, taking one of the elements and principles of design, line, and really just going crazy with line and what you can do with line. So, you know, that's the kind of thing we want you to explore. So the first thing we're going to do is the brainstorming. So I'm going to give you some words. I'll put them on the board. Architecture is one of them. Origami is another. Origami is very structural. So here's the origami one. So these are all fashion examples inspired by origami. And you can see, and again, like as with architecture, you can see there, origami is great to work with because it's got really interesting structures. So all of these, even these really interesting pleating techniques. But you can see this one's inspired by a skeleton, not just this kind of a combination, you know, of looking at a skeletal structure. So, you know, origami, yes, but also herringbones and fish scales and, you know, repeat patterns. So very interesting. And things like this, that's a good example of using asymmetric design rather than symmetrical. So again, when we talk about balance, we'll talk about symmetry. Do you make the garment the same on both sides? Do you make it perfectly symmetrical, or do you want to play with asymmetrical? So once you've got an idea, that's again where you can use those elements and principles to go, okay, let me explore that concept as a symmetrical design, then let's try it asymmetrical, let's try it long, let's try it short, let's try exaggerating the top.
Anything is okay.
Yeah, there's a lot, there's so many things you can explore. So I'll stop now and I'll put some of those words on the board and I'll fix up the brief. It does need to be adjusted to have some of this in there. Other words we've worked with, you saw decay is a good one. You can work with something like forest. It's kind of up to you. You can suggest words to me, but if it's too general, like even forest is a bit too general, you might instead go, I'm going to explore winter forest, and then that might take you to ice crystals, and maybe that's a better one to work with. So then you go, okay, let me go and have a look at crystals and ice and frost. Actually, frost was a word we used before. So I'll put some of these up on the board, and then if they inspire you, great. But you actually might find after the brainstorming session that another word pops up that you think is even better, and you'll work with that. And so that you'll start getting more specific. So rather than just going, okay, everything circus, you might go clowns and clown ruffs, because that's an idea. Or ringmaster with the epaulets and the military thing. so you get more specific before you do the mood board. So step one, you're going to do brainstorming on a sheet of paper. I'll get you some A3 paper, and then we'll scan that and we'll put it into Photoshop on an A3 board, and we'll then start putting some pictures in, and you can work with Pinterest as well to get you, quickly get more images once you get a bit more specific about which concept has worked. So to begin with, you're doing 2 mind maps, so 2 completely different ideas. So you might do origami, and that's very structural, and then you might do decay and start looking at mushrooms, which are very organic. So pick 2 things that are quite different, and then see which one you think is going to take you somewhere interesting. Okay, so I will just stop.